one is this is going to be kind of a controversial pick. Because this one definitely will not be an album that you think 70s when you listen to it, or like, ooh, this is a soundtrack to the 70s. Because it's seen as even like, it's either seen as a complete mess or a masterpiece to fans of this artist. I find it to be a messy masterpiece. And that's going to be Leonard Cohen, Death of a Ladies Man. Really bizarre record. You know, I don't know if you guys know anything about this album.
What are the songs on there? I think I've heard
well, one of my favorite songs on here is Don't Go Home With Your Heart On. And True Love Leaves No Traces, Iodine, Paper Thin Hotel. You know, actually, Cohen did not like tour behind any of these songs. I think he did Paper Thin Hotel a couple of times, but he very rarely revisited any of these songs later on because of how dark the experience was recording this album. Because it's produced by Phil Spector. And Phil Spector was completely off his rocker by this time. It was recorded in 1977. Both artists were kind of not doing too hot in a commercial sense. And they thought, oh, we'll take Leonard Cohen, the sad acoustic guy, and Phil Spector, the wall of sound guy, and mash them together, and that will create genius. And I mean, sometimes Cohen sounds completely out of place in Spector's production, because he's just blasting horns and violins and bass. And Cohen's like, I'm used to just a single acoustic guitar. I don't know what I'm doing here. But they're just so interesting. Like, it's just a very interesting listen. And the songs on here, Cohen has never been sleazier. He is just a complete sex hound in this record. And like the main song here, which I love, it's like a space odyssey. The title track, he basically is talking about having orgies in a mirrored room and how basically he's all burnt out on drugs and sex. It's really intense, but I love this record. I come back to it time and time again. It's definitely not my favorite Cohen album, or even his best, but sometimes I like experiments, even if they're just a big swing and a miss. And I don't think that this is a swing and a miss. It's like a swing and a foul ball, and it would have been a home run if it had just been recorrected a little bit. And Spector's ego got in the way, in a big way, on this record. When you open up the gatefold and look at the lyrics, Spector's name is in front of Cohen's name on the songwriting credits. And
part of the deal, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
That's probably how Leonard could afford them.
For sure. And also, apparently, I read in a Cohen biography, it was such a just nightmarish experience recording this record. Spector would have guns lying all over the studio and booze bottles. And then one day he came over to Cohen, wrapped his arm around his neck and put a gun to his chest and said, Leonard, you know I love you, right? And he's like, apparently he said, I hope you do, Phil.
Yeah, there's all kinds of stories about him and John Lennon.
Yeah.
They tied John Lennon up in the studio and left him there overnight.
Yep.
and then there was another time when Lennon was had gotten into an argument with some of his background singers, and Phil Spector pulled out a 45 and shot it off in the studio to get their attention.
Right.
It was a whack job.
This is why I love music.
But you see, like, to me, while this is a controversial pick, it's not going to be on anybody's greatest of lists. To me, this album epitomizes the 70s because it is all about grandiose ambitions, sex, and misguided and like attempts at bringing peace and love through really weird means.
Don't forget cocaine.
Yeah, lots of cocaine.
I'm sure Phil Spector was way into that by that time.
Oh yeah, but I mean, if you guys haven't listened to this record, give it a listen. It's like it has moments of extreme cheese, but the lyrics are incredibly provocative, and the moments that do work on here are really, really good. So I like it. And the fact that Bob Dylan was brought in a like 50-piece choir for Don't Go Home With Your Heart On is pretty amazing. So
that's cool.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, it's a cool record.
Well, this is one of my all-time favorite records. It might be a little more obvious than some of my picks, but can't talk about the 70s without talking about this.
Is that a promo copy?
Yes, this is a white label promo.
Oh.
So this is a the very first pressing of this record. Stooges Funhouse, Iggy Pop at his all-time height. I mean, top of his game as far as I'm concerned. He did a lot of other great stuff, but this album is just brilliant. It's just raw and scary and everything a great sort of garage band rock and roll album should be. And I think basically all others are kind of judged by this.
Mm-hmm.
So it was basically done live in the studio too, which a lot of people don't know. They actually set up in front of the producer who was behind the glass and basically played these songs live. Mm-hmm. And Iggy was trying to scare the shit out of him because he was a suit from Elektra, and he probably did. So here's the label.
Now here's the guy. Promo. Here's a guy just flexing right now.
Yeah, right.
Flexing.
Yeah, this is a pretty valuable record.
How many other copies do you have?
This is it. This because nothing else would compare to this.
Sure.
I mean, it's also mint. That's the other part.
Yeah.
It is absolutely dead mint. Mm-hmm. I remember the collection I bought to get this. It was years ago. Somebody walked in the record store, and there was a lot of stuff that, you know, I was one of those guys, I just want to move it all. And it was one of those situations where there was a lot of stuff I didn't really want, but I bought it all just to get this.
Yeah.
How many white label promos have you ever seen of this record? I've never seen another one.
I've seen one
with the hype sticker.
Seen one while working in a record store, but it was beat to hell. It did not look like that.
Yeah. So yeah, this is a serious listen. I mean, this is one of those records like, you know, you can't even believe what you're hearing when you're listening to it. It is so three-dimensional and so punchy, and there's really nothing else like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right.
Sorry you got to go after that one, Garrett.
Yeah, I know, right? No, I think you're going to be impressed. So the thing that I noticed when I was putting together this collection is like probably 60 or 70% of my records are all from the 70s. So it was tough for me to pick the other decades. And I thought most of the stuff that I bring up in any of our vlogs are mostly from the 70s. So I wanted to pick something that wouldn't be the usual suspects. And this was a record, Ken, that you I think, had me get maybe the second to last time I was in the store. And this is a guy named David Bromberg. This is his
Ooh.
titled first record.
Nice.
I've only
That's a
listened to this
great
once,
record.
but this is a mind-blowing record.
Yeah.
So for those of you who don't know about David Bromberg, he was kind of like a session musician. I think he played with Dylan and Jerry Garcia and all the kind of like folk rock kind of guys.
Producer too. Produced
Producer.
a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So he.
In fact,
so,
John Hartford's record, Aeroplane,
sure.
which is considered one of the best bluegrass records of all time, he produced it.
Right. Right. So I think he was in the scene for quite a while before he did his first record. Maybe he was touring on his own before that, but this is his first record. There's a picture of him on the back here. And a very, very off the wall set of liner notes by Alfred G. Aronovitz that almost reads, I don't want to say like Allen Ginsberg, but it's very, very bizarre. And there's like some information kind of included about him and biographical stuff, but a lot of it's just very strange avant-garde things about Elton Llewellyn Paw III reading a book about David Bromberg, and then all of a sudden he is David Bromberg, but he's wearing like this alien costume. It's really bizarre. But the music, I should talk about the music because this is a record. He's kind of got this like almost Zen-like simplicity to his music where it's very, very direct and very, very potent. And when it's funny, it's funny and it's light. And when it's dark, it's like just about as deep and dark as you can go. The last song on side 2 is called Delia, which is a traditional song. He didn't write it, but Delia, about this guy who kills his wife and then he's like regrets it severely, and it's like it's dark. It's a dark listen. And Sammy's song, which he wrote, and Bob Dylan plays on it.
Sammy's song is dark too.
It's
man.
really dark. Yeah.
Yeah, another interesting tidbit about David Bromberg. He's one of the sort of small group of guitarists that studied with Reverend Gary Davis in New York.
Wow, did not know that.
Yep, with Jorma Kaukonen and who else? Rory Block. I think he maybe had about 10 students, and David Bromberg was one of them.
Yeah, his guitar playing is very impressive. He's kind of got that like Frizzell thing going on where he's got like a lot of chops, but he doesn't show them 80% of the time. And he stretches out a bit on the Boggy Road to Milledgeville, which is kind of a standard. Would that be Celtic?
Bluegrass.
Bluegrass, yeah. So he cuts loose a little bit on there, and he plays some like really, really soul-crushing blues on here and some more folky kind of stuff. Just a really great kind of survey of all the not all of the American styles, but a lot of the American styles that have been leading up to it. Nothing like groundbreaking. He didn't invent anything, but he just does it all really, really nicely. And yeah, and I love the album cover. It's also
that album artwork is fantastic. It's like a Pablo Picasso portrait.
Mm-hmm.
Super cool.
It makes me think of when I was studying with Mick Goodrick. He would have us do drawings like this where we would look at a subject and then not look at our hand while we were drawing. And I kind of think that might have been what's going on here, because what it does is it captures a certain essence, even though the actual lines aren't at all accurate to what the subject is. So this is, I just wanted to name drop Mick Goodrick. That's why I told that story. But
there's another really famous kind of Western swing bluegrass album called Hillbilly Jazz. I don't know if you guys have seen that. He produced that as well.
Oh, I didn't know he produced it.
Yep.
I mean, that's a great choice. That's a super phenomenal record.
That's my big guns for the day.
Hey, I mean, super hard to choose like 60s and 70s because to me, that's like the best time for music. Just everything and anything was possible. Super cool. So
Yeah, I'm glad nobody chose Boston.
The 70s there was so much music going on in the 70s. Like there's a 60s sound, but there's so many 70s sounds.
Yep.
For sure. It's like all of the experiments of the 60s crystallized in the 70s. Like, but yeah.
Well, speaking of crystal, I mean, it was also pretty fueled by the cocaine movement of that time.
Could have something to do with it.
That's when so-called superstars really became superstars. They get big record contracts.
And disco was happening in the 70s.
Yeah.
Along with progressive rock. Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, along with the Stooges.
Yeah, right.
Which was like the absolute
opposite. Willie Nelson.
Yeah, you know, Outlaw Country.
Outlaw Country was huge. Like basically anything and everything was possible. Yeah. And maybe the death of disco was the death of music.
That's the moral of the story.
Well, remember what followed disco? Punk.
Yep, true. And you know, my next album is actually going to be a post-punk record.
There we go.
So, all right. So, segue. This record is a little bit more of a like on the nose. 80s came out with some of my absolute favorite music and some of my most detested music of all time. But this is a record that I think had reverberations into the future in a big, big way. And that's Joy Division's Closer. And, you know, this was their second and final album. Ian Curtis killed himself while I think shortly after they had recorded it and hadn't even been released yet. But just the icy sound on here, that literally, like, I know that a lot of people really love their first record, but to me, this is a much more mature sounding album with a lot more layers of sound. Starting off with Atrocity Exhibition and all of the jungle drums and different gurgling sounds that are on there, and going into like a weird icy pop song like Isolation, which is basically a danceable version about feeling completely alone in the world. It's basically all of the like songwriters that would come out in the 90s. Grunge was really influenced by this group. All the people who had become very emotional with their songwriting, I feel were heavily influenced by this record. And I just think it's a really interesting sounding album. I love this record. It's not one that I'm going to put on at 8 a.m. and drink my morning coffee to. But again, I enjoy albums with interesting sounds. And this one has so many different sounds on it. And some people are going to be turned off by Ian Curtis's voice. He sounds like a mix of a lounge singer with Jim Morrison.
Yeah, that's a good description.
But I think that it's, again, I like different sounding singers, and there's a lot of cool stuff to be found in this record for people who are willing to maybe go to a dark place, but be rewarded for their journey. So that's my choice for the 80s.
Yeah, cool. That's one of those bands I haven't really listened to enough. So
yeah, I mean,
I've only given them like a cursory, like just. So
they're kind of dark, and it's kind of an acquired taste.
For sure. And I mean, a lot of people, they just assume, you know, it's all Love Will Tear Us Apart Again, which is a great song, but I think listen to the first track off of Closer, Atrocity Exhibition. Just the percussion on that alone is mind-blowingly good. The production value on this record is, I'd say, even miles better than the first record. So, because the first record kind of is, there is no like peak. There's no. It's just kind of the same all the way through. There's a lot more variation on Closer.
Yeah. So yeah, the '80s were a rough one for me because I was playing in a bluegrass band,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to do a bluegrass pick because I figured that might be a little bit too much of a stretch. But I really love this album, the Golden Palominos with Dead Horse. And this is a really interesting band. I don't know if you know much about these guys, but it's kind of a superstar band, but kind of underground superstar guys. Anton Fier, Bill Laswell, who's done a lot of kind of world beat sort of stuff, and Nikki Skopelaitis is in this. And they tended to have a lot of guest vocalists and really kind of almost world beat flavored at times, percussive, and really, really modern for that time. Like
what would
probably
you even
20
categorize?
years ahead of where everybody else was.
Yeah. What would you categorize that album as even?
Almost kind of world beat with like a, you know, a rock overtone.
Yeah.
I
I
don't know if you know about Nikki Skopelaitis, but he's produced a lot of really interesting stuff. And Bill Laswell has produced reggae, like Sly and Robbie, and all kinds of weird world beat stuff.
Material.
So there's really nothing like these guys. It's a really unique record.
Yeah.
And they've got a lot of other ones too, but this is the one that really kind of does it for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I haven't even seen that one on vinyl.
Yeah, I bought it when it came out. In the day.
Best way to do it.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can say about this. I mean, it's produced by Anton Fier. Yeah, it's on Celluloid Records.
Okay.
Which was Bill Laswell's label, I believe. So yeah, if you want to stretch out and kind of get out of the mainstream completely, this is probably kind of some of this stuff maybe worked its way into the dance movement later because it's really percussive, but great listen. And anything you can find by these guys, pick it up. It's great. You say you like different sounds, it's pretty different.
Oh yeah, it's been a few years since I've listened to that, but I'll revisit because I always find myself listening to my records and then like, oh well, I have all this streaming available, and that's where I heard it, and I really liked it from my memory. So
yeah.
I'm glad you brought that one up. Bill Laswell especially, he strikes me as like he took that kind of the 80s sound that we think of and he was able to integrate it in all sorts of unusual and kind of avant-garde ways that I think is really important. And I haven't dug that deep into his discography, but I have spent some time with his stuff. I can't remember what else he did. Oh, he did Rocket. That was the big one with Herbie Hancock.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. He's kind of a guy like I had probably heard like 20 different things by him before I even really knew who he was, and I was like, oh my gosh, this dude's fingerprints are all over everything.
He's got solo records too.
Right.
I've got a couple of them. They're good.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So I have a very conventional pick, but I'm kind of surprised we haven't brought this guy up. I don't think we have. He's like one of my favorite artists. I think I've just avoided talking about him because I like him so much and he's so obvious. But speaking of 80s records, man, like Dang, this record is on this for anyone who's confused. This is Graceland by Paul Simon. I have a Graceland T-shirt. I should have worn it today. And this is kind of the solidification into Paul Simon, the ethnomusicologist, maybe, because I think this record is I don't remember what the title was. The one with like mother and child reunion and stuff. He had some reggae and some other things on here. But on this one, I think almost all the musicians, if not all of them, are South African.
Yep.
Almost all of them. Some from, let's see, Zydeco bands. What's he saying? I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but yeah, he got a little bit of criticism. I think people thought maybe it wasn't right that he was basically he would just write lyrics and melodies, and then the musicians that he hired would create the music that became so iconic. And I think some people thought it was almost kind of a colonizer kind of a attitude, or that he wasn't giving the musicians
cultural misappropriation.
Yeah. Which I totally understand, and I think it's valid to bring that up. But like the music is just so good, you know what I mean? And there's so many iconic musicians on here. I think this is Richard Bona's first recorded appearance, I'm pretty sure. And then he went on to do so many other incredible things. And there's just so many. I think it was controversial because there was like an anti-apartheid boycott where all the artists were saying we're going to stop doing any sort of business or collaboration with people in South Africa to like protest the government. And so he recorded this while that was going on. I think some people were upset about that too. But the music and the lyrics and just the whole project, it just works so well, and it's so such a cohesive and an engaging record. There's so many classics on here. Boy in the Bubble, obviously. Graceland, which is like South African musicians' kind of interpretation of country. And Diamonds on the Soles of Her Shoes is another classic. You Can Call Me Al, everybody knows that one. Crazy Love. So yeah, I think I prefer the record that came after, Rhythm of the Saints, which also included a lot of Brazilian percussion and stuff. I don't have that one on vinyl yet, so that's why I'm holding up this one. But this one is very high up on my list. I really admire Paul Simon's songwriting. I think he's one of the most brilliant songwriters of all time. And this is, most people have heard of him, but if you haven't spent any time, this is probably a good entry record, I would say, aside from obviously the Simon and Garfunkel stuff.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a great 80s pick.
Yeah. And it aged well. There's like nothing really dated sounding about it. Which you always have to say when you're talking about 80s records. Is it dated or is it not dated?
Yeah. It's really funny because like with 60s and 70s, they can have their own sound too, but it's charming. Like it's a charming date. Whereas the 80s, it can be incredibly grating. Like, ooh, this sounds like the 80s. This was a little bit more difficult because like around this time, not a lot of people were releasing things on vinyl. The CD boom that started, and vinyl was being seen as a dead medium. But I have a few records from the 90s and ones that are really important to me anyway. And this guy, he's in my top 3 favorite artists of all time. And this is maybe, it jockeys for my number 1 position, but it's Tom Waits' Bone Machine. Released in 1992 after a 5-year absence from recording. His last album was in 1987, Frank's Wild Years. And people go to Rain Dogs as his best, and I mean, that's the one that jockeys for my number one spot too. Rain Dog shows everything that Tom Waits is capable of, but Bone Machine is like him at his just madman alchemist best. Like he is just going absolutely wild on this record. Starting off with the Earth Died Screaming. He's literally just sounds like basically taking that crazed soapbox preacher from the 40s and bringing it to the 1990s. Playing on junkyard instruments. Has a lot of songs on here about just destruction, rebirth, and just being a badass in general. Most people will recognize the song Going Out West from the soundtrack to Fight Club. But I love the song I Don't Want to Grow Up. Basically, just like about seeing how if growing up is just being in a world full of a bunch of assholes, I don't want to be a part of that world. But then it ends on the kind of a soft and tender note. He's joined by Keith Richards on the song That Feel. And it's a very nice way to end this song, this album that's full of like really aggressive, rough stuff. It's a fantastic record and one of the best from the 90s. I think that Jacob Dylan, Bob Dylan's son, actually took the picture for this album cover. So,
Evocative album cover.
Yeah, very evocative, very intense. I think he's wearing like some goggles with Vikings horns.
Just a typical day for Tom.
Basically, just out in his junkyard, screaming into the abyss.
Yeah, I read an interview with Tom Waits about the Keith Richards incident. Mm-hmm. He had asked Keith to come and play on the record, so he was sitting there one afternoon and like a semi pulls up, and they unloaded like I don't know how many guitars, like 80 or something, and Keith Richards basically didn't know what he was going to do. So he just brought like a whole bunch of stuff just so he would be prepared. I think they did 2 songs.
Yep. I think he helped out on 2 songs. I can't remember which the other one was. But yeah, the fact that he brought all that equipment and basically none of it was needed. It was all just junkyard instruments that Tom Waits had created himself.
Yeah.
And like, I love that record. Again, lots of different sounds. My personal favorite Tom Waits is Alice, but that was released in 2002. Sorry. Got there. But yeah, this is a phenomenal record. If anyone wants to get into Tom Waits, I might not recommend starting there. But if you're looking for a more adventurous listen, that is a great place to go.
All right. Well, my pick of the 90s was hard because there's a lot of stuff in the 90s I like, even though it was kind of a low point for vinyl. But can never stop listening to this. The Jayhawks, Tomorrow Green Grass. I think this record probably was one of the sort of foundational records in what we call Americana today. Obviously, the guys from this band spread out, and I think they're involved in Sun Volt and a bunch of the other Americana bands too. And Mark Olson has been involved with a lot of different stuff. But talk about good harmonies. The harmonies on this just are unbeatable. It's a great album. And so another sort of side story, I had a record store in the 80s and 90s that we did a lot of stuff with the Electric Fetus in Minneapolis. And one year at the end of the year, I think it was like Christmas party kind of thing, they invited us to come up and So we get there, and there's a band setting up for the party. Turns out, and this is like 6 months after this came out. Turns out it was the Jayhawks. So I got to watch these guys from literally 5 feet away play the
Wow.
entire record in a bar. and they're from Minneapolis, so nobody really cared but us.
Right.
It was great. But if you haven't listened to this, take a close listen. It's just the songwriting is stellar. The harmonies are just gorgeous, and it's got a lot of elements of the other Americana records that you would like. It's just a great record.
Nice. Awesome pick.
All right, I'm going to close this out with a pretty iconic band from the 90s. Although most of I think, bigger stuff was in the 2000s. This is a record, I should probably say, this is The Bends by Radiohead. This is a record I've kind of put off listening to for a long time, mainly because it was kind of the transitional album between their first record and then OK Computer, and those are the two you hear about the most. You hear about their first record and how they were kind of, everyone thought they're going to be a one-hit wonder, and then yada, 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 OK Computer, holy shit, nobody knew that a band like that could come out with an album like that. And so I thought, well, if they're not quite to OK Computer, I don't know if I feel like I'd rather just listen to OK Computer. So I would always listen to everything that was after that. And, obviously my favorites, In Rainbows, unbelievable. Amnesiac, unbelievable. You know what I mean? So I didn't think I was going to be that into this record. I think I read it was more like rock oriented and there wasn't quite as much experimentation stuff going on. But it's Radiohead. I don't know what I expected. It's an incredible record. There's so much great stuff on here. It's kind of presented in a more, definitely a more rock-oriented context than like Lotus Flower, very song-oriented, actual song structures, unlike the later stuff, which was almost kind of James Brown-like in that it was just very texture and groove-oriented. And they still, they have a very, very special sensibility on how to make a song sonically interesting, even with conventional instrumentation, with just like guitars and a bass. You'll be listening, you'll be grooving out, and a guitar part will come in that's just like totally unexpected and like very fresh sounding. I think probably Fake Plastic Trees is probably the most famous song off of this one. I don't know, this might be, I don't know when this pressing was made. This might have been an original pressing. There's something goofy about this pressing, like only one side crackles. It was very weird. So I don't know if it was, I don't remember if I got this used or new, but it could be that it's not a good pressing, or it could be that whoever had it last had a horrible record player or something. But yeah, I'll send this video back in time to Garrett and be like, dude, like it's Radiohead. Like you're not gonna like it. So
Right.
Here you go. This is sometimes I try to do this if I can get lined up. Am I close?
Very close. Very close.
All right, that's the list. We did it. Thank you
did it.
for playing. Yeah, I forgot to write the list. We're supposed to be plugging the record store. Ken, we just talked about a bunch of records. If someone's having a shortage of records right now and they don't have anything to listen to, or they saw something here that they were intrigued by, what would they do if they were trying to go get some to replenish their record collection?
Well, if it were me, I would go down to Paramount Record Shop in downtown Watertown on Friday or Saturday and do some serious digging.
I can attest. You're guaranteed to find something that you're gonna love.
Yeah,
Guaranteed.
you're definitely an offender.
Very
First degree.
so. Very much so. I'm fine with it.
Right. Yeah, and you're buying too, Ken.
We're always buying collections.
Right.
Always looking to buy records.
Right. So if you're watching this on our channel and this is your first time seeing Isaac, you got to go check out his channel. He's like, I mean, he shops at Ken's store. He's got like a crazy wide range of music that he talks about. So go check out Blind Island. We'll have a link down there. You'll be able to find it.
And if you're watching this on my channel, you guys have to go and check out Deep Grooves for the Paramount Record Shop. One of the best channels here on YouTube. Their vlog is incredible and always introducing new, interesting artists to people. If you're looking for stuff that's off the beaten path that you haven't heard of before, this is the channel that you want to check out. So I'm going to include a link in my description below. So
thank you, man.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Yeah.
Well, thanks
right.
for having me. Appreciate it.
Sweet. All right. I think that's a good place to sign off. Thanks for joining, everybody.